All right, everyone. Welcome to a live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And of course, I am your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert. And we're broadcasting kind of a special edition of the show today because we have three veterans that we wanted to get on, and we worked it out with them and their organization so that we could have them on. And I'm going to introduce you to them in just a minute. But of course, first, I wanted to welcome our audience for joining us again today and thanking you for all your participation in our show because it's you folks that help make the show. So we appreciate your participation and the information and suggestions you send to us. I also want to thank you, too, for helping us be listed in the top 25 podcasts to watch up here in Northern Virginia. In fact, we were recently just listed as number 12 in the top 25. So I want to thank all of our audience for helping to make that possible. Of course, I also want to thank our sponsors, Quest Jewelers from Merrifield, Virginia. For those of you who have not watched before, and I talk about them all the time, Quest Jewelers is a fine quality jewelers. They make custom pieces. So you need to contact Juan Tain there. He and his staff will be glad to help you. They've got some beautiful pieces. And let's see, we're in September. Still a little ways away from the holidays, but it's never too soon to start that holiday look. And it's kind of funny because in some of the stores, I've already seen holiday decorations and stuff up, and we're just now in September. So it's never too early. I also want to thank Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business located in Fairfax, Virginia, and retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park and his professional crew there. They're there to help your business with whatever you may need, whether it's training, IT security, program management, anything that your business could need. His folks are there to help you. So we want to thank our great sponsors who take us and help us support the show. So I want to introduce our guest tonight, and we're really happy to have these three gentlemen on. And I will just very briefly state they're all Air Force veterans, all retired with a combination of over 70 years of service to the country. And we're so happy to have them here. And we have tonight, of course, retired Colonel Richard Koehnke. We also have retired Colonel Jay Steinmetz and retired Senior Master Sgt. Ed Benson. And as I said, all Air Force veterans. And I think we've got some pretty interesting information to have them share with us today. So, gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show and join us.
You're very welcome.
There we go. Yeah, don't be afraid to step in now. But no, in all seriousness, it's great to have you three guys on. And you know, I didn't want to go too much into your backgrounds because we're going to talk a little bit about this. But one of the first things I wanted to just ask all three of you, and you know, it doesn't matter. Well, Ed, I'll tell you what, we'll start with you just to kind of start off. But what prompted you to? I know you served during Vietnam as well. What prompted you to join the military at that time?
Well, I was tired of going to school. I hadn't been accepted in any colleges at that time, at the end of middle of my senior year in high school. So I started looking around to see what might be. And of course, Vietnam was building, and took the tests and everything else. And some of my other service brethren asked the question, and I tell them it's quite simple. I had the scores that allowed me to choose, and I chose the Air Force.
Yeah.
1965 was when I started.
Well, yeah, I looked at your bio and saw the years, and I went, "Wow, you were in the military when I was just a kid." So Jay, I know you attended the Air Force Academy, correct?
That's correct. I was really looking for the educational role. I've gotten offers at a couple of colleges. Just the facilities and abilities there at the academy were so great. I chose that, and of course learning to fly and all the other things that come with that. So pretty phenomenal too.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you if you would, Jay, when you talk, if you could maybe try to speak up just a little bit more the next time we talk, but that's okay. So, I recently had a guest on who was living in Colorado, but got an appointment to a service academy, but went to West Point lived in Colorado Springs and ended up going to West Point and went the opposite direction. So, okay. All right. And, Richard, what about you? I know you were flying as a pilot while you were in Vietnam. How did you come to be an Air Force flight guy?
Well, I was going into my junior year in college. The lady that I was dating at the time, my wife, says, "You're wasting your money going to school. Go find something that's interesting." I saw things talking about aviation cadets and flying. That's where I got. That's how I got into as a cadet, and ended up kind of like flying. And turns out I decided to stay as long as I was flying, and I got out 31 years older.
Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that it's compared to some of my younger veterans I've had on the show. What I thought was interesting for you, Richard, is I was amazed to see that you flew over 280 missions over 2 tours while you were in Vietnam.
When you're flying F-105, that's what you get. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Although I got fortunate, I could fly other missions, but the 100 up over North that counts. So after that, they kept me around and I kept flying. As long as I was flying, I was happy. Sort of happy.
Yeah, well, I know you mentioned the ring around Hanoi, and I'm assuming that you were talking a little bit about that anti-aircraft ring they had set up around the Capitol at that time. Is that what you were talking about?
Well, they had very high defenses around the Capitol, obviously. But when we got into it, we finally got an order to let us to go to near downtown to bomb the fold-over bridge. And I had to do some targets on the other end of the bridge. And when I started pulling out, turn around and sound like a good idea, so I just kept going. And I got a nice look at downtown Hanoi. And I kept thinking to myself, look at all those shells up there going off. We must not go on in. Later on, I calmed down a little bit and realized that all the shells are up there. They came by me on the way.
So you're referring to the Dahmer Bridge, correct?
Yeah. All over.
Yeah.
Big French bridge. We carried most of the traffic from China to
Yeah, I mean it's incredible to talk to someone who had flown that many missions while they were there, because you see so much, you hear so much about what was going on over there and how the pilots really had a rough time at times flying all those combat missions. So when I saw that you had flown that many missions, I thought, oh my gosh, that's just incredible. So Ed, I know that you spent a tour in Vietnam as an air traffic controller where you had a base that had one single airstrip.
I was not an air traffic controller. I was an electronics technician. I maintained the radar that allowed the operators to tell these guys where to go.
Oh, okay. All right. So you maintained the equipment for the air tower and the controllers and stuff?
Yes, we were long range radar. We provided air traffic, not necessarily air traffic control. We provided warning and airspace clearance through the operator side of it.
So I would imagine the pilots over there probably were a little jealous of you, since you got to stay in one place, live in one place, possibly sleep in a Quonset hut or a building at night and get hot meals every now and then.
It was a little bit different than that, but you're right. we did have a roof over our head most nights.
Yeah.
And so we were able to do that. We subsisted with the Army, which was
Yeah.
across town from where we were billeted, and that was a unique experience in and of itself, because they expected us to pay cash for what we ate. That was a little bit strange. 57 cents for a breakfast box of sea ration.
You mean to tell me they were charging you over there for your food?
Absolutely, but we got paid for it, so it was just
Yeah.
kind of exchange. They wouldn't pay the Army.
I think that's kind of incredible in a situation like that. Now, I will tell you, when I was in Desert Storm, I was assigned to the 2nd Armored Cav Regiment, and we had 2 Air Force forward air controllers, calling in fast movers and air support, because we had our own Apaches and Cobras, but they would call in the fast movers, so they'd be calling in people possibly like Jay and Richard at the time that we were over there. And I had an interesting conversation with one of the guys, and he told me that, he said, this is rough out here, because we were living out in the desert for 6 months. And he said, I'm kind of used to being back near the port, living in the hotel, until they sent me out here with you guys. So that was kind of always the joke. The Air Force guys always hated hanging around with us Army guys, because they did not like the living conditions.
There's some truth to that.
What's that?
All my cousins were Army guys. They had Rangers and they parachuted. They ran around the ground all the time. I got ready to go, and I said, I don't like sleeping on the ground. The last thing we were going to do is march, and the Air Force didn't march. So that's where I was.
Ah, okay. So you got a little taste of some of that too, then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, no, it's just amazing though. It's as I talk with you guys, and having spent, my time in the military, I had a younger brother that was in the Air Force for 8 years. And, to just kind of laugh about those intra-service rivalries that we have going on. So when Jay, I want to ask you, you graduated from the Air Force Academy, and then you ended up flying C-141s. Is that what you were doing? But it seems like most of yours was, a lot more of yours was Cold War action, when the wall came down and you were flying missions into Russia and Eastern Europe.
It was. I flew 141s all over the world. We did the nuclear airlift role as well, which was an interesting twist. And then later in my career, when this wall came down, I was flying Learjet and Army King Airs and Army UH-1 through all of Europe, East and Western Europe, the Warsaw Pact, all through Africa, and all through the republics of the Soviet Union. And that was a pretty interesting time, because we would land, and now with double the number of Americans in the country just by landing. So, and that was on a Learjet, not a 141. So they were exciting times. Wild west of diplomacy.
Well, I remember, I remember Europe. My first tour in Europe was was before the wall fell down. And then, of course, when I went back for my final tour, it was after. And it was, completely different missions, because one of our missions, my first tour, was responsibility to, guard one of the gaps over there from, a Soviet or West or Eastern Bloc invasion. And then when we go back the next time, the wall's down and things are open, and, it's just a completely different situation. But I think, you also mentioned that some of the missions you flew, you were carrying, hazardous cargo and materials, looking for nuclear related materials as well.
Yes, I did do that. I was a member of what's termed as the Prime Nuclear Airlift Force, and the designated number of people, one squadron usually, that airlifts nuclear materials and equipment other hazardous missions where all the airmen are cleared at higher security levels. And have more experience dealing with special handling.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it kind of gives me pause too, because I spent most of my career as a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare specialist in the Army. My first enlistment, I was in a field artillery unit, and we actually practiced. We had a section that practiced specifically to fire battlefield nukes out of a 155 howitzer. So, I got a chance to kind of see some of that stuff up close. So it's always kind of amazing the things that they have us do in the military. So I just want to ask you, Ed, share with us, if you would, what was one of your unique experiences you had while you were over in Vietnam?
Yeah. In my unit, we had a lot of calibrated test equipment that we had periodically. So it was a rotating thing that a radar guy was sent on the trip. So we wound up with 400 or 500 pounds of equipment being loaded on an airplane. And then suddenly the airplane got diverted to a little out of the way place, and we got kicked off. There'll be another airplane by sometime in the next 24 hours, so we get to spend the night in the jungle. I had an appreciation for that, and what my brethren went through.
Yeah.
So that was kind of different for me, but I don't think it was unique. We all did what we had to do to get done what we had to get done.
Yeah.
We had some surprises when we got to the female lab, for example, at Cameron Bay. One of the things that they said was, okay, go by building and go by the armory and surrender your weapons. Well, I was in an area where we had weapons and we kept them. And they didn't want us to be on Cameron Bay, for example, with our own weapons. We were protected by the security police force.
Yeah.
Well, some of us didn't necessarily believe that very well. But that was one of the things that we had to do. And it was interesting, but it was kind of another day in the life of.
Another day in the life in uniform, right?
Absolutely.
So, Richard, was there any particular mission or experience you had that kind of really sticks in your mind or made an impact on you?
Well, we were talking about the rig Hanoi. I was, when that frag order, Legion order came in, they're going through, they were going to go. You've only got 25 minutes to dock, you can go. We're throwing all these people out. Why not some spirit? And I said, well, I'm going to go get some coffee. I ended up going with the leader of the band, getting one of the elements. So my ninth mission was to do a bridge. So, and that's the first mission I had to do. Our fit right in the ring, right? Six pack to the area. But then it was kind of an exciting day. And you got this typical day of sands that had guns, and you got one of those. So I guess it was whatever I wanted to do like that. I mean, you just didn't get out of there without getting shot. So pulled over the bridge and we put it down. One of the most beautiful sounds you hear was the force commander coming after us saying the bridge is down. That Marine meant a lot to all of us. Go in there and get it and get out of that.
It's like I said, it's always amazing to talk with some of the pilots, especially I've had a couple of friends who were, pilots during Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom. But it's always amazing to talk to the pilots and hear some of the things that they've done and some of the things that they've experienced. So Jay, just during your time when you were flying around, the Soviets, I still remember my time in Bosnia. when I was on the ground and we had to take a convoy through the Soviet sector to one of their bases. Was there anything different at that time that you remember with your experience with the Soviets at that time that stuck out to you?
Oh, absolutely. I flew almost all of the first U.S. missions into the Warsaw Pact nation and the Soviet Republic
Yeah.
after they came apart. And everything was different. One of the things we were trying to determine was who was going to be in charge of the country the next week,
Yeah.
or who was in control of the nuclear weapons that day. So we were all over the place doing that in areas where it seemed nobody spoke English within 400 miles of where we were. So we were out there alone, and we weren't afraid, but we were certainly alone in many spots. One of the ones that really amazed me was in Dushanbe. We landed, and they were arresting anybody who didn't have a citizen of Dushanbe stamp in their passport, because they had some problems with the rebels of various nations infiltrating. And we stayed in a hotel on the second floor, of the big hotel in Dushanbe. The third floor was going to be the new American embassy, and the fourth floor was already the Russian embassy. And the rebels were all trying to attack the American and Russian embassies, and we're staying on the second floor between us and them. And we would travel out of town, and there would be massive roadblocks and checkpoints that the Soviet army, there was no Soviet army anymore because it had disbanded.
Yeah.
So it really screws its charge. And those made for some exciting times.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can just imagine, especially when you're not sure who had a responsibility for those weapons too, with all of that stuff going on. We're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with our gentlemen here. They're three veterans, and for those of you in the audience, stay with us, and we'll be right back. right, welcome back, everyone. And you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner, and we've been in a discussion here with three of our wonderful Air Force veterans with a combined over 70 years of service to the country. And we want to thank retired Colonel Richard Koehnke and retired Colonel Jay Steinmetz and retired Senior Master Sgt. Ed Benson for joining us today. I want to talk to you guys. We've talked a little bit about some of your military experiences. I know that all of you are involved with or in some point affected by the Heroes Bridge organization here in Northern Virginia. So Ed, let me just start with you. I understand that you volunteer with the organization. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you're doing?
I'm doing a little bit of everything that I'm asked to do. I started out originally being part of what was at that time the engineers, because I had some marginal level of skill. I could do things. I've built handicapped accessible ramps to ADA specification for several veterans. I've cleaned gutters, I've cleaned showers, I've done everything but windows. I've helped Jay get back and forth to a couple of his medical appointments when I'm not committed to other activities. It's a wonderful experience to be able to be in my position, to be able to help folks like Jay and Richard and the other veterans that I help stay in their home or transport or just whatever happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You guys tell me. A lot of the veterans that I have on the show that I talk to, they all talk about wanting to be able to continue to give something back, either to their community or their fellow veterans. Does that kind of sound familiar, Richard? Have you heard that before as well?
Well, I think we all have the role of family. We've always been that way.
Yeah.
For me, I'm continuing on with some of the work I was doing in the military. So being a consultant, that works okay. Except ever since I've had a medical problem, I've had to stop traveling. But now I'm just about to get back in the land of the living, and hopefully I can get started doing some more things for the people here.
Yeah, because I know you still like to go out with your dogs and do stuff like that too, don't you?
Well,
Yeah.
they're my buddies.
Yeah.
I lost my wishes and now I got my dogs, so everything's going fine. Everybody needs a dog to talk to. They listen, they don't talk back, they criticize, they just sit there and listen. Good deal.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I didn't mean to leave out your wife out of that and insinuate that you were spending all the time with the dogs, but that's it's one of the things that your people really enjoy their pets. So Jay, what has been your experience with the Heroes Bridge organization?
Well, it's a great organization. I've been very impressed with all the people that I've dealt with in Heroes Bridge, predominantly providing me transportation to medical requirements for me that I can't do myself. And it's been greatly helpful. But to be around veterans, around a group of people who have been dedicated to service through their whole life, who have an appreciation for your kind of lifestyle and who have lived that lifestyle themselves, it's lifting, because just the communication with those people has been very, very beneficial.
So do you guys still feel, after all of these years, you still feel that camaraderie with your fellow veterans that you used to have?
That's how we live.
Yeah.
That's how we live. Take care of each other. But the nice thing about coming here, you get to talk to more military people. He has people listen to you tell the lies about what you did.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that comradeship that we feel, you're right. I think it's something that we never lose, because that's when they approached me about doing this show. Um, that was how I looked at it. I said, this is my opportunity to stay linked to veterans and veteran causes and things like that. And all the veterans that I have on here to a person all talk about that camaraderie, and some of them that are not quite hooked into the veteran community talk about how much they miss it. So I'm assuming that all of you still enjoy your time off. And Richard, I was just mentioning the time that you spend with your dogs and doing things like that. What about you, Ed? What do you like to do in your free time now?
I'd like to have free time.
Hearing.
I carry a business card that says volunteer.
Okay.
And Heroes Bridge is one of about 5 places that I volunteer regularly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I do disaster response work with faith-based ministry. That is 2 days a week when we're in garrison. When a disaster strikes and we deploy, I was gone about 200 days last year. My wife is very supportive of that, unless something breaks, and then I get red hot phone calls. I just came back from a week in West Virginia where I was helping rebuild a church.
Oh.
I'll be leaving on Saturday to go to Tennessee to meet 6 of my closest, best personal friends, 4 of which I've never met before, to build hiking trails in the Shenandoah. Yeah, sometimes I think I'd like to have some time off. I spent 24 years in the Air Force in community service, and I looked at it that way.
Yeah.
I went to work in industry. I was able to still do some community service while I was working there. I accepted a buyout into retirement in 2016. And one of the things that I was told was, make sure that you got something that causes you to get up every morning.
Yeah.
And not spend time on the deck with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. And I think I've succeeded beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah, it sounds like that you're staying pretty busy. So Jay, what about you? I mean, what are you doing in your time that you have?
Well, I don't have a lot. I bounce between one medical session to another. But time with the grandkids, my children, is always precious. I'm trying to write some of my experiences now. Which is not an easy task, since I can't see enough to read the material I'm writing. It makes it a challenge.
Yeah.
But I'm putting that material together. Those stories and tidbits will be helpful for others as well.
Okay, so Richard, do you have any plans to do any traveling with your wife still, or are you guys just mainly relaxing and enjoying the dogs and the sunsets?
We just got back from Athens, Kansas, to go to the Lee Earhart Museum and the Forest of Freedom. So we travel everywhere. I get to fly with her every once in a while. Or we go flying. So we do just fine. So we don't have to stay put. And we can sometimes go get $100 hamburger or something.
Well, it's great to see guys like you. And when I say guys like you, I'm 64, and I know all of you gentlemen are older than I am, but it's great to see guys like you still out there volunteering, doing things, enjoying life, even after spending all those years serving your country. And I'm so proud to have fellow veterans like yourselves, out there in the community. And I'm in fact finishing my second career at the end of this year. I'm retiring for good, and I have already signed up and going to orientation to volunteer at the Museum of the United States Army, the one they opened up near Fort Belvoir. So, I feel that urge myself, to continue to do things just like all three of you. And I have to tell you, I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to come on the show today to share a little bit of your story and what you're doing now with us, because this is a kind of thing we like to get out. We love to see what our veterans are doing and what they've done in the past and how you've served the country. So again, before we close, I just want to thank you all three for taking the time to come on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And I want to thank all of those of you in the audience that have been watching us with these three gentlemen this morning, outstanding veterans with years of service, and we thank them for what they've done for the country. For those of you out there that keep track of the information that we post, I want to share with you, the VA has got a new link up now, Hurricane Assistance for Veterans. So if you want to take a look at what they're doing, they talk about not only some financial assistance possible, but loans, shelters, and other things that you and your family may need as veterans. So I encourage you to go to va.gov. There's the link, the news at va.gov. Take a look and see what the VA is trying to do for those veterans and their families that are affected by the hurricanes. And for the rest of our audience, again, thanking our guests tonight. It's been wonderful to talk with these three gentlemen. I want to thank you also for taking the time to join us on our show. And please, veterans that are out there, two things. First of all, thank you for your service. You're a great asset to the nation. And also for those veterans out there listening, remember, there's always help for you. Don't do it alone. Reach out for help if you need the help. It's there and you can get it. And thank you, CC. There's our Veterans Crisis Hotline up again. So again, I can't stress it enough. For veterans out there, if you're in need of help, make sure you reach out to someone. So thank you for joining us on today's show, a special edition. And again, thank you to these three gentlemen, these fantastic Air Force veterans who joined us today. And we hope to see you on our next broadcast.